All right, guys, I promised you a plot twist, and a plot twist you shall have. So on page 159, we're at chapter 38, and it's a pretty good chapter. So Pip was 21 in the previous chapter, and in this chapter it starts out when he's 23. So it's been a couple years. He's come into his money. He's been spending his money. He's also been pulling in some unnecessary debt. All of these things have been going on in his world. So I was 3 or 20 years of age. Not another word had I heard to enlighten me on the subject of my expectations. And we had left Bernard's Inn more than a year, and lived in the temple. Our chambers were in the garden court down by the river. Mr. Pocket and I, for some time, parted company as to our original relations, though we continued on the best of terms. Business had taken Herbert to journey to Marseille. I was alone, and in a dull sense of being alone, dispirited and anxious, I sadly missed the cheerful face and ready response of my friend. It was wretched weather, stormy and wet, mud, deep in all of the streets. Day after day, a vast, heavy well had been driving over London from the east, and it drove still, as if in the east that there was an eternity of cloud and wind. Alterations had been made in that part of the temple since this time, and it is not now as lonely of character as it had been then, nor is it as exposed to the river. We lived in the top of the last house. The wind rushing up the river shook the house that night, like the discharges of a cannon or breaking of a sea. I saw that the lamps in the court were blown out, and that the lamps on the bridges and the shores were shuddering, and that the coal fires and barges on the river were being carried away before the wind, like red-hot splashes in the rain. I read with my watch upon the table, proposing to close my book at 11 o'clock, and as I shut it, St. Paul's and the many church clocks in the city struck that hour. The sound was curiously flawed by the wind, and I was listening and thinking how the wind assailed it and tore at it, and when I heard a foot upon the stair. Remembering then that the staircase light had blown out, I took up my reading lamp and went to the stair head. Whoever was below stopped on seeing my lamp, for I was quiet. "Is there someone down there, is there not?" I called out, looking down. "Yes," said a voice from the darkness beneath. "What floor do you want?" "The top, Mr. Pip." That is my name. There is nothing the matter." "Nothing the matter," returned the voice, and the man came on. I stood with my lamp held over the stair rail, and he came slowly within its light, and I saw a face that was strange to me, looking up with an incomprehensible air of being touched and pleased by the sight of me. Moving the lamp as the man moved, I made out that he was substantially dressed, but roughly, like the voyager from the sea. That he had long iron-gray hair, and that his age was about 60. That he was a muscular man, strong in the legs, and he was browned and hardened by exposure to weather, and as he ascended the last stair or two, and the light of my lamp included us both, I saw, with a stupid kind of amazement, that he was holding out both of his hands to me. "Pray, what is your business?" I asked him. "My business?" he repeated, pausing. "Ah, yes, I will explain my business by your leave." "Do you wish to come in?" "Yes," he replied. I wish to come in, master." And I took him into the room I had just left, and having set the lamp on the table, asked him as civilly as I could to explain himself. He looked about him with the strangest air, an air of wondering pleasure, as if he had some part in the things that he had admired. And he pulled off a rough outer coat and his hat, and then I saw that his head was furrowed and bald, and that the long iron-gray hair grew only on its sides. But I saw that nothing in that at least explained him. On the contrary, I saw him the next moment once more holding out both of his hands to me. "What do you mean?" I said, expecting him to be mad. He stopped and is looking at me, and slowly rubbed his right hand over his head. "It's disappointing to a man," he said, in a coarse, broken voice. "Arter having looked forward so distant and come so far, and you're not to be blamed for that, neither of us is to be blamed for that. I speak in half a minute. Just give me a half a minute, please." He sat down on a chair that stood before the fire, and covered his forehead with his large, brown, veinous hands. I looked at him attentively then, and recoiled a little more from him, because I did not know him. "There is no one nigh," he said, looking over his shoulder, "is there?" "Why do you, a stranger coming into my rooms at this time of night, ask that question?" said I. "Ah, you're a game one," he returned. "I'm glad you've growed up to be a game one. But don't catch hold of me. You'd be sorry afterwards to have done it." I relinquished the intention he detected, for I did know him. Yet even I could not recall a single feature, but I knew him. If the wind and the rain had driven away the intervening years, had scattered all the intervening objects, and swept us to the churchyard where we first stood face to face on such different levels, I could not have known my convict any more distinctly than I knew him now, as he sat in the chair before the fire. No need to take a file from his pocket and show it to me. No need to take the handkerchief from his neck and twist it around his head. No need to hug himself with both of his arms and take a shivering turn across the room and looking back at me for recognition. I knew him before he gave me any one of those aids, though a moment before I had not been conscious of remotely suspecting his identity. Yes, Pip's convict is back. Let's keep going. He came back to where I stood and again held out both of his hands, not knowing what to do, for in my astonishment I had lost my self-possession. I reluctantly gave him my hands, and he grasped them heartily, raised them to his lips, kissed them, and held them. "You acted nobly, my boy," he said. "Noble Pip! And I'd never forgot it." At a change in his manner, as if he were going to embrace me, I laid a hand upon his chest and pushed him away. "Stay," I said. "Keep off. If you are grateful for me for what I did as a little child, I hope that you have shown your gratitude by mending your way of life. If you ever came here to thank me, it was not necessary. Still, however you found me out, there must be something good in the feeling that has brought you here, and I will not repulse you, but surely you must understand that My attention was so attracted by the singularity of his fixed look at me that the words died away on my tongue. "You was a-sayin'," he observed when we confronted one another in silence, "that surely I must understand." "What surely must I understand?" That I cannot wish to renew this chance intercourse with you of long ago, under these different circumstances. I am glad to believe that you have repented and recovered yourself, and I'm glad to tell you so. I am glad that, thinking I deserve to be thanked, that you came to thank me, but our ways are different ways, nonetheless. You are wet, and you look weary. Will you drink something before you go?" He had placed his handkerchief loosely and had stood and keenly observant of me, biting a long end of it. "I think," he answered, still with that end in his mouth and still observant of me, "that I will drink, I thank ye, before I go." I made him some hot rum and water, and put the glass to him, and saw with amazement that his eyes were full of tears. I hope," I said, "that you do not think I spoke harshly to you just now. I had no intention of doing it. I'm sorry if I did. I wish that you are well, and that you're happy." And as I put my glass to my lips, he stretched out his hand, and I gave him mine, and then he drank, and drew his sleeve across his eyes and forehead. "How are you living?" I asked him. I've been a sheep farmer, stock breeder, other trades beside, away in the New World. Many thousand miles of stormy water from this." So let's just pause a second. At least one person in every class did the penal colonies. And that's where Pip's convict has been. He was taken to the penal colonies after the prison ships, the hulks, got too full of people. They sent him to the penal colonies, and his specific penal colony was in Australia. So he's back from Australia. And when he was in Australia, he had sheep herds and goat herds, and he was up in the mountains, and he was herding sheep and doing all of this. And now he is back. So he was down in, Australia, essentially at a penal colony, and now he has found his way back. Excuse me. "I hope you have done well," Pip says. "I've done wonderful well. No man has done nigh as well as me. I'm famous for it." "Oh, I'm glad to hear it." "I hope you should say so, my dear boy." Without stopping to try to understand these words or the tone with which they were spoken, I turned off to a point that had just come into my mind. Have you ever seen a messenger you once sent to me?" I inquired, "since he undertook the trust, the guy from the carriage with the money." "Never set eyes upon him. I weren't likely to." "Well, he came faithfully, and he brought them to me. The 2 1-pound notes. I was a poor boy then, as you know, and to a poor boy they were a little fortune. But like you, I have done well since, and you must let me pay them back to you. You can put them in some other poor boy's use." So I took out my purse. He watched me as I laid my purse upon the table and opened it, and he watched me as I separated 2 1-pound notes from its contents. They were clean and new, and I spread them out and handed them over to him. Still watching me, he laid them one atop the other, folded them longwise, and gave them a twist, and then set fire to them at the lamp, and dropped the ashes into the tray. May I make so bold, he said then, to ask ye how you've done so well since you and me was out on them lone shivering marshes? He emptied his glass, got up, and stood at the side of the fire with his heavy brown hand on the mantel shelf. He put a foot up on the bars to dry and warm it. The wet boot began to steam, but he neither looked at it nor at the fire, but steadily looked at me, as if it was only now that I began to tremble. When my lips parted, I forced myself to tell him that I had been chosen to succeed in some property. Might a mere varmint ask what property, he said. I faltered. I don't know. Might a mere varmint ask whose property, he said. I faltered again. I don't know. Could I make a guess, I wonder, said the convict, at your income since you have come of age? Is the first figure a 5? With my heart beating like a heavy hammer of disordered action, I rose out of my chair and stood with my hand upon the back of it, looking wildly at him. Concerning a guardian, he went on. There ought to have been some guardian or such like whilst she was a minor. Some lawyer, maybe. As to the first letter of the lawyer's name, now would it be J? All the truth of my position came flashing on me, and its disappointments, dangers, disgraces, consequences of all kinds rushed in at such a multitude that I was borne down by them and had a struggle for every breath I drew. Put it, he resumed, as the employer of that lawyer whose name began with J and might be Jaggers, put it that he come oversea to Portsmouth and landed there, and that he wanted to come on to you. However, you found him out. He says just now, well, how did I find you? Well, I wrote from Portsmouth to a person in London with particulars of your address, and that person's name? Why, Wemmick. I could not have spoken one word, though it had been to save my life. I stood with a hand on the chair back and hand on my chest where I seemed to be suffocating. I stood so, looking wildly at him until I grasped at the chair when the room began to surge and turn, and he caught me and drew me onto the sofa and put up the cushions and bent on one knee before me, bringing that face that I now well remembered, and I shuddered at to be very near to mine. Yes, Pip, dear boy, I've made a gentleman of you. It's me that's done it. I swore that time, sure as I ever earned a guinea, that guinea should go to you. I swore afterwards, sure as I ever speculated and got rich, that you should get rich. I lived rough, that you should live smooth. I worked hard, that you should be above work. What odds, dear boy, did I foretell you to feel an obligation? Not of it. I tell it for you, so that their hunted dunghill dog, what kept your life in, got his head so high that he could make a gentleman, and Pip, you're him. Wait, what? The benefactor is not Miss Havisham? The benefactor is Pip's convict? Oh, crap! That is not what Pip wanted to hear. Oh, man. Okay, here we go. In abhorrence in which I held the man, the dread I had of him, the repugnance with which I shrank from him, could not have been exceeded if he had been a terrible beast. Pip is mad and disgusted and petrified and angry and overwhelmed, and this is not good news for Pip. Looky here, Pip, I'm your second father, and you're my son, or more to me than any other son. I've put away money only for you to spend. When I was hired out a shepherd in a solitary hut, not seeing no faces but faces of sheep, till I half forgot what men's and women's faces look like, I'd see yours. I dropped my knife many a time in that hut when I was eating my dinner or supper, and I says, there's that boy again, looking at me while I eats and a drink. I would see you there many a times, as plain as I ever seen you in them misty marshes. Lord, strike me dead, I said each time, and I goes out to the open air to say it under the open heavens. But once if I give liberty and money, I'll make that boy a gentleman. And I done it. Why, look at you, dear boy. Look at these here lodgings of yours, fit for a lord. A lord! You shall show them money with the lords for wagers and beat 'em. And again he took both of my hands and put them to his lips, while my blood ran cold within me. Don't you mind talking, Pip, he said. You ain't looked slowly forward to this as I have. You wasn't prepared for this as I was. But didn't you ever think it was me? Oh, no. No, I returned. Never. Well, you see, it was me, and single-handed. Never a soul in it but me, my own self, and Mr. Jaggers. Was there no one else? No, he said with a glance of surprise. Who else would there be? Ha! And dear boy, how good-looking you've growed. But you've got some bright eyes somewhere, eh? Isn't there some eyes somewhere whose what your love thoughts are on? Oh, Estella. They shall be yours, dear boy, if money can buy him. Not that a gentleman like you, well set up as you, can't win him of his own game, but money shall back ya. Let me finish what I was telling you, dear boy. From that there hut and that there hiring out, I got money left me by my master, who died, who had been the same as me, and got my liberty, and went on for myself. And every single thing I went for you. Lord, strike a blight upon it, I says, whatever I went to it, for it ain't for him. It was all prosperous, wonderful, and I give you to understanding now, I'm famous for it. It was the money left me and the gains of that first few years what I sent to Mr. Jaggers, all for you, when he first came after you, agreeable to my letter. Oh, that he had never come. Oh, that he had left me in that forge, far from contented, but yet, in comparison, happy. And then, dear boy, I held before my mind what I would for certain come one day and see my boy and make myself known to him on his own ground. And he laid his hand on my shoulder, and I shuddered at the thought that for anything I knew, his hand might be stained with blood. Where will you put me? He asked presently. I must be put somewheres, dear boy. To sleep? Said I. Aye, yes, to sleep. Long and sound, he answered, for I've been sea-tossed and sea-washed months and months. My friend and companion and I, said I, rising from the sofa, is absent, but you can have his room. You won't be back tomorrow, will he? No, I answered almost mechanically, not tomorrow. Because looky here, dear boy, he said, dropping his voice and laying a long finger on my breast in an impressive manner, caution is necessary. What do you mean, caution? It's death. What's death? I was sent for life, and it was death to come back here. It's been overmuch coming back of late years, and I should certainly be hanged if I was took. Nothing was needed but this. The wretched man, after loading me with his wretched gold and silver chains for years, had risked his life to come to me, and I held it there in my keeping. My first care was to close the shutters so that the light might not be seen from without, and then to close and make fast the doors. When I did so, he stood at the drinking rum and eating biscuits. When I gone to Herbert's room and shut off any other communication between it and the staircase, and through the room through our conversation had been held, I asked him if he would go to bed, and he said yes. But I asked him for some of my gentleman's linen to put on in the morning, and I brought it out and laid it ready for him, and my blood ran cold when he again took me by his both hands and gave me a good night. I got away from him without knowing how I did it, and mended the fire in the room where we had been together, and sat down by it, afraid to go to bed. For an hour or more I remained too stunned to think, and it was not until I began to think that I became fully aware of how wretched I was. Miss Havisham's intentions toward me were all a mere dream. Estelle was not designed for me. I only suffered in Sada's house as a convenience, a sting for the greedy relations, a model with a mechanical heart to practice on when there was no other practice at hand. Those were the first smarts I had. But the sharpest and deepest pain of all, it was for the convict. It was for the convict, guilty of I knew not what crimes, that I had deserted Joe. In every rage of wind and rush of rain I heard pursuers. Twice I could have sworn there was knocking and whispering at the outer door. With those fears upon me I began either to imagine or recall that I had mysterious warnings of this man's approach, that for weeks gone I had passed faces in the streets that I thought looked like his. And then came the reflection that I had seen him with my childish eyes to be a desperately violent man, that I had heard that other convict reiterate that he had tried to murder him. And out of such remembrances I brought into the light of the fire a half-formed terror that I might not be safe to be shut up in here with a man in the dead of the wind of wild solitary night. This dilated until it filled the room and impelled me to take out a candle and go and to look at my dreadful burden. He had rolled a handkerchief round his head, and his face was set and lowering in his sleep, and he was asleep and quietly too, but he had a pistol lying on his pillow. Assured of this, I softly removed the key to the outside of the door and turned it on him before I again sat down by the fire. Gradually I slipped from the chair and lay on the floor, and when I awoke without having parted in my sleep with the perception of my wretchedness, the clocks of the eastward churches were striking 5, the candles were wasted out, the fire was dead, and the wind and rain intensified the thick, black darkness. So we have the convict, and Pip realizes that he gave up everything. He gave up Joe. He gave up Biddy. He gave up his life as a blacksmith. He gave up all these things with the intention, with his expectation being that Miss Havisham was readying him to marry Estella. But now the reality of the situation has come in, and he realizes that's not the case at all. That this convict was giving him money, was creating a gentleman because he could, because he wanted to, because for two reasons. Because he wanted to pay Pip back for the kindness, and two, because being a gentleman is very important to the convict, at least a gentleman on the outside, in visually, what you wear, how you look, what you have. That's very important to the convict, and we'll find out why, but the convict wanted to create a gentleman, and he just happened to choose Pip. So with that giant bummer on our hands, we're going to stop, and hopefully I'll be back tomorrow, and we will read chapter 39 and do some more speed reading through here. Oh, jeepers. Try to get this done as much as possible by Monday. Okay. Awesome. Hopefully we'll see you guys soon. Have a good day. Bye.